Hello, friends, and welcome into Rates and Barrels. We're here at The Athletic. I am Chris Welsh, joined by Eno and we are very happy to have you here today as we are doing, I believe this is called the Project Prospect, as we've been calling it. That was DVR's name. DVR, by the way, is with the family. Baby's good, and we're going to be holding down the fort. We did not have an episode yesterday as it was a holiday, but normal, I will be here for you guys Monday with Eno. Eno, did you enjoy not having a second to yourself on a holiday where your kids were home?
Yeah. We had a degree of difficulty and had a party, so it was a pretty insane day. It was a couple of moms had birthday parties, so the dads had to do a little extra heavy lifting with the kids. We took them to the park, and I had this like maybe 3-minute sequence where one kid came up and whacked me with a stick in a way that still hurts on my thumb. And then I threw like a batting practice pitch to this other kid who his swing didn't look good, but he was kind of athletic. So he pummeled me. Like he hit a line drive, like, I don't know, like 60, 70 mile an hour line drive, like
right at the
into my solar plexus. Yeah. And I was, and then as I'm down, the kid who hit me with the stick comes back and hits me again.
Yeah, I was about to say, come over. I was going to joke that he's going to come and whack you. Of course he would. That sounds
just like,
right.
Leave me alone for a second.
People don't realize when you have kids, like holidays and day off, they're not like fun because it's just chaos that's going on. So, all right. So you would have rather been recording Rates and Barrels and being hit by a stick.
I would.
So, all right, that's good. I actually spent some of the time, if anyone's watching on the YouTube channel, I am quite red as I'm looking on my face. I look even redder. I've been out in the sun every single day as spring training is here. Camps are going on. I have been to probably 5 or 6 of them.
And it's cold, so you forgot to put your sunscreen on.
Well, that is exactly right. The first couple days, famously, as people know now, Jacob deGrom was supposed to come out and work with all the pitchers on day 1, which was Wednesday. And then he felt some tightness. But also, people were very dismissive of it because they're like, cold in Arizona. I was there. It had snowed the night before. I'm not even joking. And it was 37 degrees. And it was insane. And it was cold the whole way through. So I was really like not paying attention to sunblock. And then on Monday, it got me because it was like 79, 80 degrees out here. Sun was blaring and I had not sunblocked up. So a little red out here. We got lots of baseball to talk about, which I'm excited to do. It was a total, and I live here. It was the biggest rookie move I've ever done. So today I was like, just sprayed out. Everything was good. But you guys can always find us, by the way, on the Twitters if you got any questions related to that. Also want to tell you guys that the 2023 Fantasy Baseball Draft Kit launching soon. It's actually, I think, available. I think I saw a tweet. Our boy Jake Seeley had put that out there. You guys can go and find that. theathletic.com/rates and barrels. If you guys want to sign up on The Athletic, $2 a month for the first year gets you in the door. So go and sign up, theathletic.com/rates and barrels, and you can check out that article, which you and I, we both have. You probably did a whole bunch more. I know I wrote a sleeper on the hitters and the pitcher side, which is in there, and a whole bunch more you guys can check out as well. I don't know if this is a part of it. This is very, very exciting. If you guys don't know, the Pitching Plus projections are out, and I believe they came out today, so give us the drill here. I kind of wish I told you before we started recording. I kind of wish we were talking about pitching today for it, but talk to us about the Pitching Plus projections that just came out.
Yeah, it's really fun. Jordan Rosenblum, who's worked at a few different sites around the internet, doing cool work statistically, basically took my model, the Stuff Plus and Location Plus, and made pitching projections with it. And a couple of really interesting things came out of it, which is, to date, the model's been more powerful in season because it comes online really quickly, and it can be a great way to like look at a debut for a young pitcher, or how a pitcher's coming back off an injury. And so in that way, it's a little bit been like the radar gun, and it is heavily influenced by velo, but there's shapes and other things in it. And what we found is that year to year, it wasn't as sticky. And that's partially because command isn't that sticky year to year, and partially because we weren't including real life results. And at some point, there's at some point, there's like sort of, if you have good process and bad results, at some point it's just bad results. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there is a point at which you have to just be like, well, you know, Jarrell Cotton, I know this model has been saying that this changeup is amazing, but we're on year 5. I don't think there's a Jarrell Cotton breakout coming. So what we did was married it with normal projections. And that also allowed us to park adjust and do aging and like do all the things you need to do to make something better. And one of the really interesting things that came out of it was, you know, in baseball analytics, there's been this whole thing about defense independent pitching. You know, it's FIP or DIPS theory, which is that because there's so much noise in a pitcher's BABIP allowed, there's basically the assumption that pitchers can't control their BABIP. And that they can't control suppress hits. They can't control their batting average on balls in play. Our model found that stuff and location made the most difference in projecting BABIP. And
fascinating.
Projections have a wider spread in projected BABIP than other projections. So you'll find that somebody like Paul Sewald, who has great stuff plus and great location plus, our model loves him to death. Last year he had a 170 BABIP. Every other model is saying 270 BABIP this year, and we're like, nah, more like 210, 230. So I think 230. Our lowest is around 230. So.
Can you also talk just real quick? We had an interesting one off air. If you just want to get into it, I know we're going to talk about prospects. We're going to talk about hitting prospects, actually rookies for 2023 on the impact. But you and I would be remiss if we didn't talk about this. You actually mentioned a player that really fell down also when you were talking about ballpark factors. And I was like, I had just talked about this guy as a breakout.
Yeah.
Do you want to just give like the quick little 30-second summary of what we were talking about with Nick Lodolo and what happened with the pitching plus projection?
Yeah, I was looking at Nick Lodolo, and you know, when I looked at it through the lens of just stuff and location, I thought, oh man, this guy is ready to go, and I still think that's pretty true. And we now have projected stuff plus. He's projected to have a 105 stuff plus. That's better than Sonny Gray, and better than Kyle Wright, and better than Dustin May even. You know, so it's on the level of well, he's not like Logan Webb as a pitcher, but it's, you know, he's on that level where he's got good but not elite stuff. And then he's projected to have a poor command, 97 location plus. But that's enough for me. I had him pretty high based on that stuff plus. Like Dustin May, I have at 41. And so I had Nick Lodolo at like 42, just right around Dustin May. Once we park adjusted his numbers, though, he came out with a 4.15 ERA. The park adjustment for Dustin May is he's got a 3.61, you know, PP ERA, as we call it. So I just had to drop Nick Lodolo down. I've still got him in my top 60. I'm still excited for him. And I think, you know, there are Reds pitchers that beat the park, but it was instructive to me to be like, oh yeah, you know what? This is a tough park. And we have to remember that when we're looking at Nick Lodolo.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's something that I was just telling you, like, I'm trying to be very cognizant more than ever before about some of these other factors, ballpark factors, of course, also just team context of run support, defensively, what they've got out there. Sometimes you just kind of like blank out and you're just like, this guy's stuff is just so good. And I like this pitcher so much. And you forget, well, team context, ballpark factors, he might have 9 wins on the year and the ERA might be a little bit inflated. Where can people find pitch plus projections right now? I know you tweeted out about it.
There's a tweet out, my newest rankings. If you just look for my newest rankings, look on my author page on The Athletic. They're attached to those rankings. They're linked in the Google Doc for the deep divers that have been using the Google Doc. They've got full projections in there, and we fully projected, you know, their line against, their barrels against, their, you know, all sorts of stuff. So
yeah,
you can even take our projections and insert them into whatever sort of value sheet you've got, hopefully. And we're taking some suggestions. If there's something that's not in the sheet, in the projections that you'd like in the projections, let me know. Jordan is still hard at work on this, but we're really proud of the work we're done, and it seems to perform well when we did validation tests, and you know, The model is already quicker than strikeouts minus walks, which is the other most powerful, in-season indicator we have. So it's really great in season. It just got a lot better season to season.
I love it. I love it. And remember, theathletic.com/rates-and-barrels. Go and get that and go and rock in. And we'll probably have more conversation around this in coming episodes as well next week when we do the rookies pitchers for 2023. But today we are talking about the hitters. That's what we're going to get into here for this episode. It is the rookies of interest hitter side for 2023. So really what that means is players that you're going to be drafting, players that you guys most likely are going to be taking a look at with your drafts that are coming up, whether you're doing like NFBC drafts, or you're doing your home leagues or whatever it is. What level of interest should you really have? And that's like a perfect segue before we talk about specific names. I'm curious, what level of interest do you usually put into rookies when constructing rosters? Because as a prospect person, like that's what I'm apparently known for now and everything. And that's great. Dynasty and prospects. I'm pretty agnostic or even atheistic, if you will, to the fantasy side of prospects. I just don't want to be interested in them. Like I don't want them for redraft. The return is relatively minimal unless they're coming at like a super low cost. And there's a couple guys that are at the top. So like what level of investment do you throw in, whether it's hitters or pitchers, to rookies on just like any given year? And if you want to be specific to this year, you can, because I know you and I talked about pitching plus projection on a certain rookie pitcher, but how are you going to invest in rookies?
Yeah, I think my general strategy is I want to draft them somewhere where I don't have to depend on them. And so that's usually not in the first 5 to 10 rounds. I'm taking people I think are projectable, have high floors, that I can depend on. If you think about it, I think they've done some research into how likely is it the player stays on your roster. And you're talking about the first 5 rounds. They're sort of like 70 to 80% likely to make it to the end of the season on your roster. In these situations where even in fab leagues, then you start going from that and it starts dropping. And then, down at the end, it's like 10% likely. That's when you start taking the real shot. So it's really easy at the end of a draft. And I got lucky in my NFBC main last year and took Julio Rodriguez as my 5th outfielder or as maybe my first reserve. So it was way, way low. It was kind of a fluke, and I was just getting lucky. But
did you draft that in like November or something? November, December?
No, it was March. I was like, this dude is killing it. He's gonna start with the team. He's killing it. And even if he doesn't start with the team, 2 weeks later, he'd still be killing it down there. It's gonna be embarrassing for them. He's gonna be up soon. So that was easy. But the process that sets you up for easy decisions like this is to kind of be like, think about depending on them. So I was available to take a prospect there. It could have been anybody. I was lucky that Julio dropped to that and it was Julio Rodriguez. But at that point, I'm like, yeah. Now I'm looking for a 1 in 10 shot at a star. That's what I want to do. Of course, the problem is that the quality of the prospects that you're getting is going down as you're waiting. So
see, that's
there is like kind of a sweet spot there.
There's 2 things in this. I had a conversation on my In This League Fantasy Baseball podcast with Derek Carty. We were talking about projections. He's the creator of the Bat X, and he had made a statement where I was kind of pushing a little bit on like the accuracy of rookies overall. And he's like, listen, over time, like it's just right. Like he believes in the accuracy reports he gets back about his projections on rookies, except the top end. I think the top end is where when rookies are kind of brought back down. Obviously last year is a prime example of it with Julio and Bobby Witt. Like overall, you could be right about lowered expectations on rookies, but are you really right if like the top 3 or 4 actually do work out, or 3 of the top 4 work out and then the next 15 don't work out? And there's also this
people
context,
who drafted Bobby Witt high last year pretty much got their return.
They paid off, but it was like 75 overall or something like that. It was high, but it wasn't insanely high. But the other thing,
that's the Corbin Carroll bet this year, right?
And that's where we're going to start with this.
Yeah.
The other question does kind of center in my mind around how teams are treating rookies, though, because we now know they're being incentivized, obviously, to break camp. They're being more incentivized than ever to bring these guys up. And we're just seeing more of a commitment to rookies overall. And that's kind of also changing the scope of when you're talking about the accuracy or, how much do they stay on the roster. Well, I don't even know if like you can look over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period to get proper results, because things have really changed dramatically over the last 12 months with how baseball is treating rookies and guys that are closer, and development overall has changed. So that's where this kind of comes into question. And the first player that comes up on this list is the highest player in any draft order. If you're looking at rookies, it is Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll, I actually pulled up the ECR, the ECR of ADP. Fantasy Pros will have like all the sites. They have all the sites up now. NFBC, I think, is a great one to take a look at as well, where the high stakes guys are. But this is like a aggregate of all of them.
Yeah, all different kinds of setups and stuff.
Yeah, so it's if you want like a broad spectrum, because not everybody plays like high advanced.
So give me some outfielders he went before, because in my draft and hold that just finished, and shout out to those guys. We finished, and they had my rankings open, and they made it very difficult for me. But in that one, I got George Springer after Corbin Carroll.
Okay, so he went 82. His ADP is 82 on this list. So here are a couple of the outfielders that are right behind him. And I got to tell you, there are some that are hard to stomach here. I'm looking at George Springer, by the way. George Springer is 67 on this list. So George Springer went quite a bit higher.
Normally goes ahead of him.
Yeah, on the average ADP. But the next player is Brian Reynolds, who has an 83 ADP on here.
Perfect sort of oatmeal versus upside moment.
Yep. How about this one? If I want to talk about volatility, Byron Buxton was the next one after that at 87 overall. Byron Buxton versus Corbin Carroll. I had a debate about Corbin Carroll versus Eloy Jimenez. Byron Buxton versus Corbin Carroll is such an explosive rookie potential working out versus like a hitter he's the Jacob deGrom of hitters. Byron Buxton is, when he's out there, he's electric, and he's a 30+ home run hitter. Speed has kind of gone away. Also, just a couple others.
382 plate.
Yeah, he's absurd. And then just throwing out like a couple other outfielders for you to simmer on here to get your takes on this. It actually falls off quite a bit on the ADP. It goes down to 104 is Tyler O'Neill, and Seiya Suzuki and Stephen Kwan at 113, 114. So those are guys that come right out.
Is that I expected to be more I expected this to be more ludicrous, because I'm looking at my draft and being like, man, I got Springer after Carroll, and people are pushing this too hard. Actually, given the names that you just put forth, I'm okay with drafting Carroll there, because all of the names that you listed have risk. Now, Reynolds has less risk, but he also doesn't steal. And steals are tough. And Carroll could steal like 40.
So this is a huge thing for me, because I do have a very specific question I want to ask you on Carroll here for a minute. Carroll's my number one overall prospect in the game. Some people have Gunnar Henderson. It's fine, to each his own, and how that works. Corbin Carroll's the fastest player in baseball last year, if people understand that. And I was looking at the sprint speeds for 90 feet. And this is something really crazy. I think it was Frank Safel that put me onto this. So when you go and look, the top 30 are usually they're within like 0.01 of each other. It'll be like 3.8. I think CJ Abrams is 3.82. If you're looking at it, you're going to see what I'm about to say. 0.01. It's now 3.83. There is no bigger gap on that entire list than the number 1 to the number 2 player, Corbin Carroll, to, I believe it was Bubba Thompson, maybe, or whoever number 2 Thompson.
It's a 0.12 difference there from between them. And if you take the next 0.12, you go from Bubba Thompson, the next 0.12 at Bubba Thompson at 2, all the way down to Alec Thomas at 50.
Well, Carroll was 3.66, and I believe Bubba Thompson was 3.74. There's no bigger differential. That was 90.
Not 0.12, it's 0.08.
Yeah, so 0.08. That's what I'm saying. 0.08 was the difference between 1 and 2. Everybody else
and 2 and 40.
That's crazy.
It's the difference between 1 and 2 and 2 and 40.
It's absurd. So it's one of those dumb things that we can throw in here. Something I have been very adamant about, and you just said it, and I'm actually really happy to hear you say it. I have said, I think Corbin Carroll leads the Diamondbacks in stolen bases, and that's not. That's
and they have McCarthy and Thomas. They have some fast guys.
That's why it's a takey type of thing. By the way, McCarthy's 8th on that sprint speed list, so he's a fast guy too.
And
but
Alec
that's why
Thomas was 50th. So like they're a fast team.
It's kind of a take from me on it, but I think projections are way undersold on Corbin Carroll. The power numbers, the guy hit 27 homers last year. Actually, I'm sorry, 28 homers across 4 different levels. So I want you to think about that. 30 plus stolen bases, 33.
Tell me something though. You know about these. So the AAA for Arizona is really aggressive, hitter friendly, right?
Yeah, PCL. Yeah.
What about their AA?
AA, I believe that's the Texas League. It's it's not on the PCL level. Like all of these are relatively hitter friendly environments. There's not a big pitcher environment. If I'm remembering correctly, I want to say AA of the high A, double and triple is probably the most pitcher friendly, but if I'm wrong, someone will 100% correct me on that.
But I just remember, like, when we talk about FOD and we talk about their pitching prospects coming through, like we talk about it being difficult for their pitching prospects in the high.
Well, that was PCL. Well, but that's why Brandon Fott, like what he did in the AAA was very reminiscent of what Zach Allen did many years ago. But someone brought this up to my attention. I'm curious to get your take on it. I have cited this for quite a bit, where I've said one of the most impressive things in my mind about Corbin Carroll when we're talking about sustainability is this guy. Power is the thing that comes up, by the way. Everybody questions the power because he's a little bit, smaller of body, though he's really filled out and he's pretty jacked. When you see him this year, that he has had a 200 ISO at every single level of his professional career except for rookie ball, which is fine. Someone had brought up, though, one of the things to think about with him is he's the fastest player on the planet, essentially, and that ISO might be is obviously taking into consideration also just doubles and triples, and he's just such a magnet to those things. Is that something you take a look at when you look at Carroll and you see really good ISO numbers, knowing he's one of the fastest guys on the freaking planet, and he also makes really great contact? Do you maybe think that the power might be a little bit oversold when you see 28 and you understand that ISO is going to be generated a little bit by the guy who hits a decent amount of doubles? I'm looking, he had 31 doubles between AA, AAA, and the majors this past year, and he had 10 triples. So that's going to play a little bit of a role in it. So, I mean, how do you factor when you're looking at Corbin Carroll, you're looking at projections and his actual value for this year?
Yeah, I don't normally think about it with a guy with a 330 ISO like he had in AA.
Yeah.
When you get up to 330, I'm like, yeah, you got legit power. A lot of times I think about it with a guy who has like a 185 ISO, or like a 180 ISO. And you're just like, ooh, how'd you get there? Like Esteury Ruiz type stuff. But with a 330, I feel like that's no doubt. On the other hand, there is doubt about Corbin Carroll's power in terms of he did not put up a great max exit velocity last year, and his barrel rate was below average for a starter. Basically, it's not the kind of line that you would expect in the StatCast stats for a guy who did hit 4 homers and did do fine, had a 240 ISO, but the underlying stats are a little bit worrisome, and that's probably why the BATX has him projected for a lower ISO than anybody else, basically a league average ISO at this point, and more like 12 to 15 homers in a full season. I don't know, man. I think with the steals the way they are, I think this is actually a high floor prospect in terms of like, what's the worst that could happen? He hits 240 with 10 homers and 30 steals.
And you spent maybe pick 75. Like, you think you're really going to regret that if you got your 30 steals and your 10 homers? Is that going to be a regret for that type of investment?
I guess it's close to where Bobby Witt went, but I think Bobby Witt was pushing. So as long as he's where he is now, I'm okay actually with Corbin Carroll. But if he starts pushing ahead of George Springer, then I'm gonna be like, well, yo, George Springer's good too, and he's good. And like, so where he is now, like Byron Buxton, a lot of risk. Tyler O'Neill, a little bit of risk. Like he's actually in the center field group right now, trying to win the center field job.
Lars.
That suggests a little bit of risk about his job because they've got like 5 outfielders there.
And what's very fascinating about that is one of my biggest sleepers of this year is Lars Nootbaar. And it kind of maybe creates a little bit of job security with Lars Nootbaar that Tyler O'Neill is not vying on any of those spots. He's going up. Him and Dylan Carlson are battling up against each other. Yeah, it's not against Lars Nootbaar.
Like all the names that you said after him, other than Reynolds, but Reynolds is just so kind of boring in a way that I could see reaching, and especially with the steals, I could see reaching for Carroll a little bit. But I think in this one case, and in fact, maybe even the next name, I think Gunnar Henderson is next on the rundown.
Yep. Yeah, and I was actually going to battle those two against for you because Gunnar Henderson comes in at 94, so there's not like it's about a round difference. I don't want to say that it's not anything. It's also a little bit more of a premier position. Gunnar Henderson, if you guys are not really familiar with it, phenomenal 2022 in the minors, had 19 homers, 22 stolen bases, hit just around 300 across both those levels. Comes up to the majors, hits 259, another 4 homers, another stolen base, double digit 12+% at every stop, walk rate, and a strikeout rate that got a little bit up there and everything, but still it's about the same team context, maybe a little bit worse of a hitting environment, at a little bit more of a premier position. This is
Better
1A, 1B.
stats though.
And so there you go.
So
So
was 4 points higher. His bail rate was double that of Carroll's.
So is Gunnar Henderson more exciting for redraft than Corbin Carroll? Corbin Carroll, I think, fits a little bit of a different need, but maybe, you talked about floor with Corbin Carroll. Could there be more floor with Gunnar Henderson, especially that it's at maybe a little bit more of a premier position at third base?
Yeah, I think the positional argument is the one that might have me have more shares of Gunnar Henderson and Corbin Carroll, because I find, despite what people are bellyaching about the outfield position this year, that there are still plenty of outfielders late. There is some playing time risk there because there's third and fourth outfielders that, are in platoons and stuff like that. But I still find names that I like late in outfield. I do not find that in third base. And so for me, Gunnar Henderson is actually the last acceptable third baseman that I want.
I know the sad thing about him.
There are other guys behind that I could just tell myself, oh, it's okay. Brian Hayes, at least he'll steal some bags, or Jose Miranda, maybe he'll hit 22 homers or whatever and have a good batting average. Like, I can convince myself that somebody else, but I would much rather have one of the top 6 third basemen. Is that 6? There's Jose Ramirez, Witt, Machado, Riley Devers, and Bregman. So the top 7.
You say Riley
and Arenado. Arenado. So that's 1, 2. I kind of think of Witt as a shortstop, but people might play him at third. 1, 2, 3.
I think he'll be primarily played at third. If people are
so there's 8 there. There's 8 there, but I just think you can even see it in the projections where after Gunnar Henderson, even in our draft here that I'm looking at, Gunnar Henderson went in the 6th round. A round after Carroll, so that's about right. And then another third baseman did not go for 4 rounds. The next one was Matt Chapman 4 rounds later.
Yeah, and it really talks about, and it's something important to think about. I know it can get overplayed sometimes. I've been talking about it as well, that like you do have to pay attention a little bit to position stuff. I'm gonna give you a prime example. I'm in Tout Wars right now, and I'm in the draft and hold. And I know why I got him fall. I had Jordan Alvarez fall to me at like 10, and the hand thing has people concerned. And I was praying for Mookie Betts to fall to me. It didn't happen, so I got Alvarez. Coming back around, I had a decision between Pete Alonso and Rafael Devers, and Devers has never been like and this is an OBP, by the way, in Tout Wars, this one. And Devers has never been a dominant OBP guy. Pete Alonso, maybe just a little bit better. Pete Alonso offensively, I kind of like a notch better, but I went with Devers because positionally he was the last of those third basemen to go. I could have maybe waited, but I don't think I would have got back to Arenado. And I decided in that where I'm probably, push come to shove, might have taken him or Goldie. Goldie was another one that I was like, because that's a much better OBP guy. I decided to focus on the position scarcity in that instance because it gets really, really bad. And if you think about a 15 team, this is a 15 team roto draft and hold. Give me Devers in the middle 2nd round here.
Because you're going to have to take a 2nd and third baseman. So you already have to get other guys. So taking your first one high up allows you to like wait a while and then take a okay 2nd one. You know what I mean? Like you have to think about the draft and holds that way. But I think just generally I'm in on Gunnar Henderson. I really like the max EV, the barrel. He hit a few too many ground balls, but he didn't really have a problem with that in the minors. So I expect him to kind of lift the ball a little better next year. I expect him to steal more because he is fast. And so I could see him hitting 275 with 25 homers and 15 steals.
Is there anything that worries you?
Projected for, but you have to think about that with elite prospects that the projections are not always a great, just like even Cardi's saying, you know, like, yes, the projections tell you what happens as a group for prospects, but Gunnar Henderson is an elite prospect, you know, and if he's in that different group, then maybe he just hits the ground running.
What did you say? Like 25-10? Was that your thought, or 25-15?
275, 25-10, 25-15.
Do you like 275, 25-10, or do you like 240, 10-30?
That's Carroll.
Yeah. Which one do you think fits your mold of like the team construction?
My drafts want the Gunnar Henderson types, because I want to get 15 steals at a time, and not fall behind in homers. I always win homers, and I'm always like 4th in stolen bases.
Yeah, I've been getting stolen bases pretty hard in a lot of my stuff. Is there any worry, last with Gunnar, about Baltimore's suppression of power? 3 of the top 10 expected home run guys. So what I'm saying is the top 10 guys that lost homers on the expected home run stat came out of Baltimore. You had Trey Mancini, who obviously left, but he was on there, Anthony Santander, and Ryan Mountcastle. So 3 of the top 10 came from that place when they changed their ballpark factors. You think that's maybe like a little bit to think about with Gunnar Henderson as well?
One thing to point out, those are all right-handers, and the way that they changed the wall was out there and left. The pull alley for left field. So I'm hoping that, you know, Gunnar Henderson as a lefty is not necessarily battling that particular problem.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Gunnar's 4 major league home runs covered the entire ballpark. You had 1 pull, 1 dead center, and the other were, 1 oppo, 1 middle, and then 2 were semi-pull, not severely pull.
I mean, that's pretty brilliant.
Yeah. How about we talk about the next guy in here? We're going to fall down a little bit of a list when you're looking at the top rookies. Those are the 2 guys you're going to look at with investments of the top 100. And my advice with people, I'd say, is no rookie or prospect has a true floor, but if you're looking for the floor, those are the 2 names. And you don't want to be crazy and compare them.
We shouldn't compare. I think your 240, 1030 for Carroll is almost more of a floor projection. So a floor projection, I think, for Gunnar Henderson to be really more in line to compare them is like, you know, something that like the bat is always the most negative. If you want a floor projection on an elite rookie, you look at the bat. And so that's 250, 15, 10.
Yeah, and still pretty solid. But I also don't want to be.
You're right. I think the floors are pretty good for these 2 guys.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too crazy and be like, hey, look at what Bobby Witt and Julio Rodriguez does, so the next 2 guys are going to do the same thing. It's not about that. But the skill sets, they're very different than, ironically, they're very different than Julio Rodriguez and Bobby Witt, but they really play to this game, and they've both got, you know, unique spots. Gunnar Henderson is also probably going to be able to hit in the middle of that lineup. And Corbin Carroll might lead off for the Diamondbacks as the fastest player in baseball. The next one is a drop-off here, but a lot of people are into it, and I'm very fascinated to get your take on this. It's Masataka Yoshida. He technically does qualify as a rookie here. In first-year player drafts, you're probably looking at him as well. He's got a Fantasy Pros ADP of 188, and the thing that stands out about him is he broke every model. He essentially came out as like the #1 batting average hitter in Steamer projections. The Bat X, I believe he was like the 5th or top 10 overall hitter. And we've kind of seen this happen before. Bat X has him at 282, 16 homers, 2 stolen bases. My gripe, and I've had a couple of people tell me not to do this too crazy, and I'm trying not to. If you look at Seiya Suzuki and you look at his translation coming over, 37 homers down to 14, batting average kind of tanked down a bit. Yoshida is a almost double walks to strikeout guy. He was a mid 300s batting average player, but there's almost no power regression built into him. The projections are wild, and they're running wild with him, and he might lead off for Boston. So this is a unique case of a little bit more of a veteran overall with no strikeout, high walk, tons of contact. I do not believe the stolen bases, and I really don't believe the power. But what say you, Eno, when you're looking at rookies? Because this actually might be the most enticing rookie for anybody out there, because he has professional experience. He's older. He's not like a lot of these other rookies, and projections love him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if we're talking floors, he's got to probably have a better floor than the last two guys we talked to, just because he's mid-career and he has numbers. The Japanese league numbers are fairly easy to translate. They are stronger in terms of signal than our AA and AAA. It is really like a quad A league where
It's
those
not like
numbers.
Ha-Sung Kim coming from the KBO over
No,
here. That was a
that's
whole
more
other
like
thing.
almost like high A or something, I would
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, floor really high. I tend to just go into Stephen Kwan territory just because of this kind of elite pairing of bit of walks and lack of strikeouts. But, people tell me subjective reports say the power's there, but a lot of it's tied into like, oh, I just saw batting practice and oh yeah, the power's there. Yeah, I bet you Stephen Kwan could get into some in batting practice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I saw that
So
with Luis Garcia, actually. Something very funny. Luis Garcia with the Nationals is one of the most slappy hitters you've ever seen in your life. Kind of a big boy, too, and just hits across his body and hits everything on the ground. But I was during the AFL some years back. He gets
but his
into
max EV is
BP.
good. He gets into
Dude,
them.
he gets into BP and his swing is different and he is crushing balls in surprise to right field. And I wanted to be like, where is this? Why is this not there? It's such an interesting approach thing that BP comes in and these dudes can just start crushing it. And he's a prime
Yeah.
example.
So I don't know. I would say buy the ATC projection, buy him at 286 with 15 homers and 3 steals. And then you'll bake in the possibility he has more power than that or even more batting average. But I think if you try to just basically use his most negative projection and pay for that, like you are allowing for better outcomes.
And I like that you said that. I like taking the most negative projection on that because this is an instance where he is the only rookie not being treated with gloves for some right reasons. He is going wild. It's very reminiscent of years back when Vladimir Guerrero was going to be in his first year and Steamer projections came out in November and he was the number one hitter in baseball. He came out with like the best batting average and he's Vlad, but this one seemed a little
I
bit
remember
wild.
all the way back to Dom Brown. Being projected by the Bill James projections for a 30-30 season going into his rookie year. I was like, oh my God, it's Dom Brown season.
Let's talk about a player that you and I have both spoke to. We spoke to on the same day. This was after our infamous In My Truck podcast recording that we did, me and Chris Blessing, when we drove down into Mesa in my car recording a podcast. And then we proceeded to go and talk with Triston Casas, I believe it was. And Triston Casas is set to be a starter with the Boston Red Sox. Again, these are players we're talking about that have locked gigs, rookies that have locked gigs right now. And Triston Casas has a overall aggregate ADP of 201. So what do you think about Casas? They're actually moving Bobby Dahlback around. They're going to experiment with him in some spots. It looks like it is his gig to run. Very smart baseball player, very in tune to who he is, has a different two-strike approach. Sometimes some of these guys don't. I like Triston Casas, but do you believe there's going to be enough impact, especially after talking to him and getting to, get to see some major league experience as well?
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting was that he kind of was more of a feel guy and he wasn't into some of the more advanced metrics or training styles. And that's not necessarily a negative. I mean, especially because a lot of times you don't care what the player is doing if the coach knows these things. You know what I mean? Like the coach can look over at the machine and, ingest it and coach the player without the player ever knowing that some of their analysis is based on his launch angle or whatever, so I think it's not necessarily a negative. Sometimes I do count it as a positive when someone's super into it, just because I feel like, oh, this player is like Newpart is super into it, and I've got an interview coming with him for Rates and Barrels where he talks about like learning everything about hitting and learning about and applying that to his craft, and like he upped his bat speed like 6 miles per hour in 2 years, and like became a much better prospect. He was
Have
a guy
you seen that before? I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you see that often, that type of increase in bat speed over that period of time? That seems absurd.
I mean, I think it's more common at lower parts of the minors, and so there are whole teams like the Guardians and other teams that'll draft good bat control guys and then be like, here's a weighted bat program, like go try to swing harder. We know that you've got, and that's why Nootbaar works so well, because he's got great, he's got great eye contact, like he's got great eye at the plate, he's got great hit tool, so he just, like, no, now just swing harder and like swing faster, and he used all these tools together. So I will think of it as a positive, but I don't think it's necessarily a negative when they don't. And Casas, is a little bit like Nootbaar in that he's got the hit tool, and it's kind of a rare combination of hit tool and extreme patience that I think could lead to like superstardom, like, you know what I mean?
Extreme
like
power too.
Right. Like there's a real chance this all clicks and he's like a Freddie Freeman-esque, like there are some of his numbers in the minors that approach that possible outcome,
Okay. So I got some, by the way, have you conducted that Nootbaar interview?
Yes.
I was going to tell you to tell him that I love him, but okay.
Okay.
How about this? Let's compare against the next guy. We've already given you, what have we given you? 4 prospects that have locked gigs. Here's a 5th one, and I saw him today. I'd love your take. Triston Casas versus Josh Jung. Obviously different positions, but both corner infielder. Here's a fun fact. I have seen a bunch of different pitching sessions that have gone on, full-on hitter-pitcher sessions, and Kumar Rocker, who it's not good. It has not been good since AFL, and it wasn't good in the sessions. And he gets in a live BP session, and the only positive he had was he did get Josh Jung going. He had Josh Jung on the ropes. He hit him with a double slider once he got 1 strike on him, and that's the way Kumar really dominated whenever he did in the AFL, was when he was in complete comfort of the slider. Very early on, he didn't want to throw the slider early. He wanted to try to establish the fastball. He couldn't, and then he learned it in his next start and the next inning. He's just going to start going slider, and he really started to be effective. Establish the slider for him, and that's what ended up happening with Josh Jung. Not to take anything away from it, but Josh Jung kind of regressed in his major league experience to who he was, but he just didn't have a whole lot of time. Batting average was low, 204. His strikeout rate was absurd at 38%. That's never been who he was. He didn't walk at all, really not who he was. He just missed a significant amount of time. Texas Rangers Josh Jung starting third baseman versus Boston Red Sox first baseman Triston Casas. Where do you think you're going to make your investment?
Casas, because 9% swing strike rate to 13% for Jung. So like Casas has more feel for hitting. Their samples are so small that I wouldn't necessarily take Josh Jung's 10% barrel rate to the bank and be like, oh, that's better than Casas. He has better raw power than Casas. Like maybe he does, maybe he has better raw power, but is he going to have better game power if he's striking out a lot? And then there's this last bit that applied to Corbin Carroll too, but I think he's further removed from the surgery, but shoulder surgeries do scare me. For hitters. And yes, you can explain away some of the troubles that Jung.
Yeah, it said like Jung.
Yeah, well, that's sorry, that's German. It would be Jung. Josh Jung, he had some struggles coming back from the shoulder surgery, right? It was shoulder.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, because he was in the sling. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Carroll is further removed, right? So Carroll has had that surgery further in his rearview mirror. So, it is possible to overcome it. He is young. The prognoses are better. And you could just say, oh, he just struck out that much this year because he just wasn't fully back. But at the same time, for him, I'm a little bit nervous about if that changes his trajectory as a player. Maybe he's just becoming more high strikeout guy now because of it.
Yeah. We've got 4 more. Then we're going to break down as best we can. A couple might be able to break camps.
We got to be a little faster here. How about these?
Yeah, exactly.
4 more that before
I'm going to pair these together. Yeah, I'm going to start pairing these together. Ezequil Tovar, Fantasy Pros ADP 237, Esteury Ruiz ADP of 274. I can never get out of my head spending time with you in the AFL when we both saw Ezequil Tovar, and immediately you're just like, I don't like him. Like, I don't like just the body, the approach, but he was like the youngest guy there. He really
That's what I said.
It around. Yeah, I know. You were like, I remembered 100%. I was just like, yeah, he's a big prospect. He's kind of young here, and you're like, I don't like it. I don't like the approach. I didn't like it. But he also had one of the worst AFLs you could have, and then he had a fantastic season next year, so it wasn't out of character. Quick thoughts on Ezequil Tovar, who's got the Rocky shortstop position theoretically locked down as long as the Rockies don't pull a Rockies and go and sign Andrelton Simmons, and Esteury Ruiz, who I think is a crazy sneaky steal, over 80 stolen bases last year, which is even mind-boggling to think about. This is why he's here. The team traded for him. Is there an investment you want in Tovar and Esteury Ruiz? And do you think one is a better option than the other?
Yeah, what's funny is I don't know how good either of them are as players. And so that part I'll leave out. People have heard me talk a lot about Esteury Ruiz because of his poor batted ball stats.
Yeah.
But I would like to say something positive about both of them, which is I think they have primo opportunity. And sometimes opportunity is more important even than quality. And so in this case, I would say these two are great in certain use cases. For me, Tovar is one of the last acceptable or one of the last somewhat exciting backup shortstops in draft and hold. The shortstops list can get empty pretty quick. And the only guy that I like at all really behind him is JP Crawford. And I don't really love JP Crawford. So it's like, Tovar, there's a bit of a cliff there in draft and hold. So that is a use case for me. And then Esteury Ruiz, I think if you are just behind in steals, we were talking about a floor projection for Corbin Carroll. The actual projection for Esteury Ruiz is 230. 6 homers and 20 to 30 steals. And you have to think that 30 steals could be light with a guy that's as fast as he is and going into such a premium situation. I mean, in Oakland, they may go for it in terms of stolen bases. They may go with him and Laureano and either Blade or Capel out in the outfield. All those guys can run. Tony Kemp can run. Nick Allen can run. Even Jace Peterson can run a little bit. So, they have so many guys on this team that can run. They may just run. And I don't see why they would stop Ruiz, especially since he was the crown jewel of their big trade. I mean, that was the Sean Murphy trade. They want to be right. They want to be right about Esteury Ruiz and shut up people like me that say that Esteury Ruiz swings a wet noodle and it makes it sound like a pancake hitting a bat when he hits it. They want to say, Sarah, you shut up. This guy's a star. So
you're like, I'm not going to say that this is what he does, but if I did, this is what he would do. And they want that to shut up. By the way, if you want to look at that floor like you were talking about, Steamer has 27 stolen base projection in 100 games. Bat X is 22 stolen bases in 114. So if it does work out on the whole season, it could go much higher. I'm not
against drafting them, especially here. If they get more helium, then maybe. But right now, it's pretty good.
The last two that we'll do real quick because we do want to hit a few of these other guys. Logan O'Hoppe looks like he's got a gig, one of the gigs with the Angels, and he's pretty exciting. But I would say the most underrated in this entire list of players that have gigs locked down right now is Miguel Vargas. Now, Miguel Vargas did just suffer, I believe it was a hairline fracture in his pinky. They do expect or hope that he's going to be back for the first spring training games, which are this weekend.
And it's the end of his pinky. He's just taking a couple of days off.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. I actually saw him just a couple of days ago. I stopped over there. It was right before the fracture. I think he's the biggest smash deal of this entire thing. ADP on Fantasy Pros consensus of 280 right now, starting second baseman for the Dodgers. Dave Roberts even came out and said he wants him and Gavin Lux to run more. He's a patient hitter. He walks. He doesn't strike out. He can play multiple positions. I think he might have the potential to even lead all rookies in batting average, and the homers are real. I think Miguel Vargas low key could be a 2020 guy this year. And I don't think it's absurd to really, really, truly think about. And at 280, one of the lowest on this list, I think it's crazy. I don't know if you have thoughts on Miguel Vargas, but this is a target for me in every single draft. All these rookies, love Corbin Carroll. I'll try to take him wherever I possibly can because I really do believe there's a floor that exists in this whole process. Casas is interesting. Yoshida, I'll probably get in points leagues, but Miguel Vargas is my target everywhere. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I love it. I think that people are nervous. The way the depth charts work on websites and the way the projections work, like the BP projections are out, and they're going to show you that they think Miguel Vargas will play 30% of the time at second base because they're hedging their bets and they're saying, oh, they have all this personnel. They're going to have days when Max Muncy plays second, blah, 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 blah. And it's smart to do it that way. I know I made the blah, blah, blah noise, but it's smart to do it that way. That's the way that you have to think if you're thinking like a machine. You want to put all these guys together, but there is just the total possibility he's the winner at the position, and his manager just said he's probably going to be most of the time the starter at second base. So maybe we should just listen to his manager and say this guy probably has the second base job unless he just has a poor spring. So I can see something. I'm a little bit more like 275 2010. But that's still really good for where he goes. And he's going to do something that's really fun that people don't always think about, which is add eligibility after the draft.
Yep.
So you can, the best case scenario is you draft him as a util, and then all of a sudden, a couple weeks into the season, you can play your corner infield or your middle infield. And I think you're right. I think he's the good one. Logan O'Hoppe for me is a decent second catcher in most two catcher leagues.
Samesies. Yeah, samesies. If you had to pick two on this list for me real quick of the rookies that have a gig that you'd make your investment. Give me, it doesn't matter who, you could say Gunnar and Corbin.
Gunnar and Miguel Vargas, I think. Yeah.
Gunnar and Miguel Vargas.
Yeah, those are my two.
All right, so here
is just interesting because I love floor, and like there's
who's the other one?
Yoshida. It's just a lot of floor,
Points leagues, I'm definitely going to target him.
Yeah.
How about some guys that might or have a shot at breaking camp? I targeted 4 players. There might be a couple others that really hold this. One is actually two have kind of the gig on roster resource, but I think there's not a definitiveness around it. The other 2 do not. And I'm going to give you all 4, and we can get your take on these. They all have an ADP past 200. The first 2 are inside the top 300. The next are outside of it. First, you have Jordan Walker, who is probably the most interesting of this and shares a lot of similarities and maybe skill set that could be a Julio Rodriguez. Ironically enough, about this time last year, Julio Rodriguez was going around 225 before he was announced he got the gig. You've got Oswald Peraza with the New York Yankees, who's got an ADP around 297. He kind of looks like he has a shortstop gig set for the New York Yankees. They really want him to win it. Speed, kind of power guy. Oscar Colas with the Chicago White Sox, who actually might be with in a couple days, hanging around him. He looks like he has one of the outfield gigs with the Chicago White Sox set up. They got Benintendi, they've got Robert, and it looks like Eloy would, if you're smart, are going to put him at DH, but they're leaving that opportunity open. And Matt Mervis, the darling of rookies to draft in November and December. This was the guy until they signed every first baseman that would look their way. Has an ADP average right now of 425. And you actually spoke to Matt Mervis in the AFL. So I'm curious, I want to hear your take on Matt Mervis. If you had to guess who does break with the team of this crew, who would you bet on?
So we had Mervis, Colas,
Peraza, and Walker.
I think the most likely to break camp with their teams are the 2 that I'm less interested in, unfortunately. I think Oswald Peraza is going to make that team because even if he's not the shortstop, he's going to be a utility guy for them. And then Oscar Colas, I think the White Sox just need outfielders, and he just happens to arrive at the right time to be an outfielder for them. Some of his numbers come with really kind of poor contact rates in the minors that I think you saw that his strikeout rate ballooned in AAA, and I think you'll see that he's more of like a 28 to 30% strikeout guy in the majors, and so not going to be that great of an offensive piece in fantasy because of the low batting average. And he does not come with a good walk rate, so I'm a little skeptical of him as as like an above average major leaguer.
He is just dirt cheap though at 302. I mean, he's past 300 with a gig and huge power. I just think
I like him. Yeah, I like him in places like where you don't have to depend on him. So like as a bench piece in a 15 teamer, that's pretty cool. Because you could have him on your bench and wait 2 weeks and be like, are they playing him every day? First of all, are they even playing him every day?
Yeah.
And then second of all, what does the contact rate look like? And that's great because contact rate is something that you can actually get some signal out of early season. If you look at more at the swinging strike rate than the strikeout rate, you can actually start to, oh, this guy can't make contact. So, I'm out. So I like Colas better than Peraza. And I think those are the two that are going to make their team. As players, just full stop. Obviously, I like Walker the most, but that is a really crowded outfield. The Walker case for me is that as my draft is coming, I would like to have a late March draft, and I'd like to see the same stuff that was happening with Julio Rodriguez, where he's playing with the starting group, he's playing in the first 5 innings, he's playing in the same place in the outfield over and over again. That would suggest to me that they're like, oh, he's our left fielder.
Can I ask you this though?
Every day, left field, third hitter in spring, and he's killing it. That seems like they're headed towards bringing him north.
I think this is a little telling. Jordan Walker in the AFL predominantly worked in right field. That was his main spot. He then also worked in some center field. Is there anything in your mind? Because I've had a million questions because I love Lars Newbar so much. Everyone's like, okay, well, how can you also like Jordan Walker, all these outfielders? Is there anything to you when you hear that Tyler O'Neill is fighting with Dylan Carlson for that center field job that just speaks to you to say, all right, well, Lars gets, whatever right if they want. And then you have another spot open on the other side that maybe they are lining that up for Jordan Walker. Juan Yepez is the DH. Do you see that at all with this move of Tyler O'Neill versus Dylan Carlson for center, that it seems like there's a better path for Jordan Walker?
I mean, it's a little perplexing to me. I would just put Tyler O'Neill in my lineup card, I feel like. But maybe it has something to say about lack of progression from Dylan Carlson.
I completely agree with that.
Because Dylan Carlson did do some nice things with walks and strikeouts, but just had no batted ball power, and that's not the type of player that most teams play, especially since he's not going to come with elite speed or whatever. So like, he could work as center field, but the profile, if it's not going to be that great defensively in center field, then the bat profile right now does not support corner outfield as well. So I do have a couple shares of Dylan Carlson early because I thought he's the center fielder.
I don't think so. I might be reading too much in. I think this is a tiny bit telling because also they gave it to O'Neill and they traded off Dylan Carlson. You still have flexibility. Juan Yepez can play corners or left.
Wait, what are you talking about with trading off?
If they trade off Carlson,
if they trade off Carlson.
Yeah, if they were trade off Carlson and they gave it
but
to
Carlson
O'Neill.
also has options. So like you could just be like, hey, we need you to hit the ball harder. You can go back down for a little bit.
Yeah.
And also just suggest that there's a winner and a loser between Tyler O'Neill and Dylan Carlson. That's what that suggests.
And that's like what I'm speculating on here is like, no one knows where Jordan Walker fits. Well, they just kind of threw it in our face. Like, if you just wanted Carlson to be the center fielder and O'Neill to be the left fielder, and you wanted them in the lineup, if you
didn't think Walker was coming up, then you would just put O'Neill in the left field group.
You would just keep him there, but they're not. Yeah, right. I think it's very telling. I think it's an early sign to maybe get your shares. Matt Mervis, and then we're going to just throw out a couple speculative ads before we get out of here because you saved him for last. He's a player that you talked to, and he was literally not. If you don't count Gunnar and Corbin Carroll, he's the most popular player to draft. His ADP rose and rose and rose in NFBC drafts. But the Cubs have been telling us this story that there's something they don't believe in. They've got Hosmer, they got Mancini, and then they even brought in Edwin Rios in there. There's something about it. But what say you with Mervis with the Cubs?
I'm still trying to read that as just hedging their bets. They're putting in more veteran guys that have higher floors. They want to compete from the beginning, and they don't want to depend. It's like our drafting strategy we're talking about here. They don't want to depend on the rookie. And so they bring in all these other guys, and if the rookie keeps playing well, I think he can beat them out. I mean, the names that you said are credible major leaguers, but none of them stops me from putting my star rookie out there. You know what I mean?
If they succeed, if he meets the qualifications of whatever that they're questioning, if it's defensively or making more contact, whatever it is, if he rises to the occasion in spring, you're right. Eric Hosmer is on like a a super low deal that they could just get out of in an instant.
Major league
Edwin
minimum,
Rios is
yeah.
nothing. Yeah, so he could be there. Was there anything when you talked to Mervis that stood out to you in the AFL?
Well, I talked earlier about like having be a positive if someone is really intelligent about their craft, and Matt Mervis is that. I mean, he told me this great story about how he was one of the people. Remember the draft got shuttled down to 5 rounds, and
in COVID year.
In the COVID year, he was one of these sort of 6th rounders, someone who just got to decide where he wanted to sign. They all had there was like a base bonus. It was like 20,000 or 50,000 or something. And that's all you could sign for. And so basically you could just decide who you wanted to play for. And he said that he made a spreadsheet of all the different organizations. And on the spreadsheet was what was the first thing? The first thing was who was at first base for them, how many years they had left on their contract, and what their projected quality was. That's their current first
He's
baseman.
one of us, He's just one of us.
Below that, he went to their minor league first baseman.
No, he didn't.
And was like, do they have quality other first basemen in the minor leagues? And then at the end, he was like, how many quality major leaguers in position prospects has this organization turned out recently? And so when he was doing that analysis, he was like, well, Bryant, Rizzo, Contreras, like these guys turn out major leaguers. Rizzo is on his way out pretty obviously. We all saw that coming. We all knew Rizzo was on his way out. And he's like, and they got nobody else. So he's like, Cubs #1. I just thought that was kind of a brilliant way to think about, just be very aware of, the best opportunity for you.
I love that story about Matt Mervis.
So then you look at his strikeout rates and his contact rates improving as he went up in the major leagues, and basically holding a 300 ISO all the way through. So statistically, he's somebody I like that has, good walk rates and low strikeout rates. And I still think there's opportunity there. I don't know exactly where to put Mervis. I think he's on like a watch list. Like you want to hear the things I was saying about Jordan Walker in terms of you want to see him penciled in at first base. You want to see him playing. You want to see fewer games of Eric Hosmer, and you want to see more of Matt Mervis in the spring. And the more that worm turns, the more it's headed towards a Hosmer release, which they could totally do because they have no skin in the game. He's not like a lifetime player, it's not. If Hosmer had signed with the Royals, they may have had a harder time cutting him, right? Because people remember all the things he did. But nobody in Chicago, if they just cut Hosmer, they'd be like, okay, whatever.
And if you want to get excited about Mervis, you can go to my Twitter. I've got some fun video from the AFL. We're running long. I'm just going to throw these out. If there's anything else, I want to keep everybody, though I know no listener is going to complain about more rates and barrels and hearing talk. But the speculative ads, if you will. Anthony Volpe, 355 ADP with the Yankees.
He's my favorite. He's my favorite of their possible shortstops. He's their best offensive option at shortstop. And I know that there's some questioning of the defense, but this is the organization that played Derek Jeter at shortstop for his entire career. So I think that they might be okay with someone who has great offense and pretty good defense.
Elly De La Cruz at 370, Brett Baty at 385.
Too early for De La Cruz. I think he's going to spend a year in the minors.
Agreed.
And Baty could push his way, but he has to push through there's a lot of headwind there. So I think he's actually pretty interesting. I'd like to see where Eduardo Escobar plays in the spring. I'd like to see what position they pencil next to that name, because the more they put a position other than third base, the more likely it is that Brett Baty breaks camp with team. Colt Keith is a guy I like. He is a guy that went and got the ball more and pulled the ball, a little bit more with authority in the air, showed some power that he hadn't showed before, is a natural bat to ball guy with good patience. If this power explosion is real, and we talked about it, and he talked about, trying to go get that ball out in front, I think this is a guy who could explode. However, he topped out at high A last year, and I think the prudent organization is going to send him back. But mid-season call-up, I might be pretty interested on dropping some coin on him because I think he's part of the future there.
I actually might even push back a little bit. He was injured a lot of the year, and he went to the Arizona Fall League, really succeeded. I think he could go to AA after his AFL experience. Another video thing you could look at, his last game in the AFL hit a nice opposite field homer that I have at Camelback Ranch. If you guys,
I think he has power to all fields now. Yeah,
he does. Good contact hitter. This is a great call. If it's fair to say, your speculative ad is Anthony Volpe. Your guy that you like the most who could break camp is Matt Mervis, and your favorite jobs are Miguel Vargas and Gunnar Henderson prospects. I think that's fair to say, right? If we're looking at this crew.
Yeah. I think those are the players I like. I mean, there's some other guys that'll play that I just don't like as much. Ruiz, we'll see. There might be a team where I have Ruiz.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at it. Hopefully we'll hear about it. Friends, that's going to do it for the episode. A little bit longer as we talked about the 2023 Rookies of Interest Hitters Edition. Next week, we're going to do the Pitchers of Interest. Over under that it is more or less minutes than this episode. You guys can take the bets and we will
talk way too much as is. And if it's pitching, I'm going over.
I don't help it either. So I'm not going to help it either. So I think you can take the over. I do want to implore you guys, go over to theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Sign up today. $2 a month. For the first year is going to get you in
draft kit.
You can get the draft kit, which is awesome. Eno's talking about the pitching plus projections. You want to see that. I've got my dynasty ranks up there. Go and check all of that out. You can find Eno on Twitter at EnoSars. You can find me at IsItTheWelsh, and Al will be back with Eno later in the week, and we'll be rocking next week as I'll be back on Monday and Tuesday. For Eno, I'm Welsh. Thank you guys for hanging out with us right here on Rates and Barrels, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening.